Georgia, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Georgia Howard and I'm a psychotherapist. I'm working as a psychotherapist the last 12 years and at the moment specialise in baby loss and the death of a child up to the age of 18. I've worked in many kind of different centres, so I have a big wide range of experience, and before that I just worked in a hotel before I did my training. Yeah, I'm a mammy and in my 40s and very, suppose, concerned about how language is changing and the effect on women and especially children at the moment.
Yeah, so that's a really sensitive area that you work in. So you're working with families who've suffered this huge life-changing thing that's happened to them.
Yeah, like it'd be very it's very kind of unique work as well because you have a real intimate insight into the impact of the loss of a child on mothers, fathers, and siblings. And we take in grandmothers and sometimes aunts who've all been impacted by the death. It's a very high trauma place to work because normally the nature of the death is quite traumatic. And obviously, with a child dying, whether it's a neonatal death or up to 18, it definitely wasn't expected. So nobody would have been prepared for this. And you just get a real intimate view of what women in particular carry during childbirth, rearing, and in the death of a child. And that's very unique, the experience of women in particular, because they've carried the baby, they've grown this baby, and the bond is so strong that actually the ability to be in life and live after the death can be quite complicated. And I think, in particular, while this isn't like a therapeutic podcast about grief, I think it innately affects women differently. And fathers' role in that as well is really important. And I feel like if we erase women, we're also erasing fathers in that too. Like if
Definitely.
society becomes a free for all where you
hmm
can be anything you want to be and it doesn't have to fit into what makes society work and what supports society.
Yeah, so we have had a guest on who lost her husband to suicide at the age of 24. So it's not just about one thing. It's like women come on here to talk about whatever they want. So we have touched on that. But yeah, it is, it like grief and loss is, it's such a difficult thing to go through. And the expectations of other people on how quickly you get over that.
Yeah. I think society, as society, we have a bit of a impatience with pain
hmm
and we want somebody to be okay so we can be okay. And it can be hard to give people the space that it's a massive life changing event, that the journey back to the self can take very varying different times for different people. And there's a, I suppose when it's a child that dies, there's a, the difficulty in coming to terms with it is the forever piece. Like I will never see my child again in this life. And then the expectation that after a certain period of time that the grieving person will be okay. It doesn't give them space to be able to learn how to live again
Yeah.
without their child. So yeah, I think we're very impatient
I think,
populations.
yeah, I think we're quite removed from death as a society, aren't we? We're like, it's hidden, it's taken away, it's like, it's behind closed doors kind of thing. The whole thing makes people really uncomfortable and we don't know what to say, even if we are trying to help. What, like, often people say really insensitive things and ask details that, you
Yeah,
know, that would re-traumatize people aren't ready to talk about yet.
no, and I think there's a real fear around, touching the pain, getting too close to
hmm
it, being affected by it sometimes, like, and it can feel really, really unbearable. But I always think if we lived in a village and we went back, it wouldn't even have to be that long ago, but even 1,000 years, if something like that happened, the whole village would support. Whereas now, for people, although people around them can be fantastic and a beautiful support, we have a sense we have to do all this ourselves because we've become very insular and autonomous, like where I suppose in places like where I work, it kind of brings in that piece where you don't have to do it on your own. That's not the
Yeah.
expectation.
And what people have said to me over the years when this sort of thing's happened, people are really good at first. They come around, they rally round you, they help you with all the practical stuff, and then once the funeral's over and like it all goes back to normal, and then people just don't know what to do or what to say or how to include you without being too much.
Yeah, and I think like for a lot of people, they don't just lose their child, but all their friend groups rejig, connections get shattered. Their wound is so massive that any slight can really hurt. Even feeling ignored or, not thought of can be really, really upsetting because like it activates more loss.
Hmm.
It makes all social interactions awkward because a lot of people that are grieving are fearful of their impact on others and already aware of it. So when they get the messaging that it's real awkward being around you right now, it reinforces that isolation and that pullback.
Yeah.
And I think for a lot of women in particular are very scared of hurting other people with their pain. So they'll really, really try and put on a really brave face to keep people in their life.
Hmm.
And a lot of men would be afraid to bring it up because they'd be like, that'll floor you. I'm afraid of it. It's that intense for me. So I think if there was a bit more ease in society of just bearing the pain for a short period of time, that's all you need to do, really.
Yeah. I think so. Sometimes men in awkward, like in uncomfortable situations like that, they tend to use humour,
Yeah.
and they can really diffuse a really tense situation, but I'm not sure how appropriate it is in that situation.
Yeah, like do you know, so something about the work that I've been doing for the last 5 years in particular has given me a great insight into how men have a very valiant, innate ability to put their own grief on the back burner to support their partner and keep them alive until they're stable enough to be able to stand themselves, and then they'll take the space to fall apart. And it's a very unique dynamic in this particular situation, but happens over and over again. And unless you're privy to maybe the strength that, the father in that position will take that role, but it has to be super instinctual for everybody to do it.
Yeah.
It's not that everybody has the same thought. It's like it shows me in a very intimate setting the roles that men and women take on within their family to support each other. And I think even in the whole gender debate, we forget what holds society, and the family is the fabric of society, what holds that together. And that might look different for everybody, but those roles are very, very important. And there's a very instinctual aspect into why people behave the way they do in their relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. So when did you start to realise what was happening around the gender stuff?
I think I would have really noticed around the time Matt Walsh was coming out with his video. I would have seen a lot of things with the Let Women Speak events, and there was things that would pop up on my phone with girls, with like young girls in their teens with double mastectomy stairs, and I was, what the fuck is this? Like, what is going on? So I remember looking into it, and what frightened me the most was the amount of noise that was being made about it. You had like 365 days of girlhood or whatever the fuck he was doing. And I
So
was,
Dylan Mulvaney, that
yeah,
was.
yeah, I thought, like, what the fuck is this? And I, having trained as a psychotherapist and done a lot of analysis in that training, I thought you would never, ever in our kind of work step into a delusion. Like the journey in therapy is to stay in reality and come into reality and explore the delusion, wonder what that was given to the person who was struggling or suffering. And when news articles were reported of, she raped her and it was clearly a man, I was thinking, how scary are we creating language where we're confusing it to the point where we have the potential to raise a population of children who cannot safeguard themselves because offending somebody is the biggest crime. And looking through all of the stuff and people asking the question, what is a woman? I thought this is a fucking no brainer. Like, why can't people answer this? Because actually, yeah, it's quite intricate, but it's quite fucking obvious. Do you
Yeah,
know, we all did home ec and did, human biology, and that we, if you did biology, the same was repeated. And that doesn't change. That doesn't mean you can feel like something else and live like that if you want to. But when you start legislating and making different rules and different laws that impact women and children, now we have a problem. I grew up in the 80s, and there was always somebody somewhere dressed as a woman. Everybody kind of knew that person was a transvestite. That's what that was. You'd probably look and think, God, that's not a great job, But then you just accepted it because it didn't impinge on you. It
yeah,
didn't come into your space. And actually, there was probably no shit given to that person. Everybody just accepted it. But with the social contagion, with what's happening to young girls, with what's happening to young boys, it's terrifying that we're actually saying things like, "Oh, let's not mutilate children's genitals." Where? How did we get here?
I know. It's frightening, isn't it?
It's terrifying.
Hmm.
Back in September, I was in Auschwitz and Birkenau, and years ago I went to Dachau, and I was thinking, we'll look back at this and think we all let this happen. None of us said you cannot remove a child's genitals. Before the repeal of the 8th in Ireland, I remember there was a massive campaign on female genital mutilation, and we were horrified. As a nation, we had to be aware of this. Couldn't believe that this would go on in these countries. Even circumcision is questionable. But you would really, now all of a sudden we're saying this is so they don't kill themselves. This is going to fix them. Let's just step into the delusion and let's chop vital pieces of them off, make them infertile forever, and make them medically dependent for the rest of their life. And ultimately, they'll never be able to become what everyone's telling them they will. And that's on every society that allows that happen. Like, I
Yeah.
feel partly responsible that that's going on. I didn't think something like that would happen.
I don't
Like,
think most of us knew, did we? Like, when I
no,
found out,
no.
I was horrified.
I was horrified. I was like, this will be a scar. There's blood in everyone's hands if we turn a blind eye to this and pretend it's okay. Like, people have phantom limbs, or they have limbs that they feel aren't theirs, and they're like, I need you to cut it off. It's not mine. Like, they're
You
told
wouldn't,
no.
I don't think you would do that, do we?
No, but so if I had a penis and said, I read this isn't mine, like, can you take it off? It doesn't feel like it belongs to me. We really need to be focusing on why. No, okay, that, yeah, that's absolutely fine, and that's not a judgment on the person that's struggling with that. That is genuinely, really, do we need to look at this, and mind you, because this answer is going to hurt you in the long term, and we can't pretend that that's a fix or a solution.
Absolutely. Really, I find myself sometimes trying to explain to someone what the other side of the argument is, and I just can't.
Yeah, I think it gets very confusing because, and maybe I'm a little bit black and white in my own thinking, and that's okay because I actually feel that that's safer because
Yeah, it
we have never
is.
changed the rules for anything else. So there's certain rules that are duty of care, do no harm, stay in reality. And if somebody, say it's tried to come into reality, still couldn't, and they were over the age of 25 when your personality is fully formed and your brain has fully developed, and that is something that you want to do with your life, and you can understand the long term consequences, agony, everything that you have to go through.
Hmm.
Okay, you're an adult, but to be intervening with children and
The thing
play,
is, though, there's some very vulnerable people who are adults who have been down that pathway. I'm thinking of Richie Herron.
yeah.
He has had a terrible time, and he had all these comorbidities which they didn't look at. They just went, nah, yes, you were born in the wrong body. You know,
But there's no such thing as being born in the wrong body.
I know,
There is no such thing, even if you feel like you want to be something else. Like, biology doesn't make massive mistakes.
no,
Like, your genetic code is what it is. That's your imprint, your blueprint in your whole body. And your whole body is going to operate in that way. And I think we've normalized as a society, I hear people say things about hormonal intervention, and if your body is not made for a specific type of hormones to run, like, so if I took a lot of testosterone, it would fuck my endocrine system up royally for life. I'd
Not
never
just
get back
that, it's your bones and everything, isn't it?
everything. So every
Osteoporosis.
part of your body needs those specific hormones to run.
Hmm.
So, like, we can't stand back and say, "Do you know what, they're just pausing it." That's bollocks. You can't pause anything. They don't
No,
get that back.
no.
And then how do you ever know, if you don't go through puberty, what your sexuality is? You didn't have the freedom and the chance and the time to explore the awkwardness of it, to do what we all did in the 70s, 80s, early 2000s. That was, puberty was shit. It was
Yeah.
a poxy time in your life that you would never revisit,
Hmm.
for everybody.
But like back then, we used to have like, like David Bowie who used to wear makeup and, all of that. He didn't think he was a woman. He just
No, you
liked
knew he
to,
was a man.
yeah, he
Yeah.
just liked to experiment with makeup and different expressions. And there's no wrong way to be a man or a woman. Just can be whoever you are without having to mutilate yourself or be
But that's the
mutilated.
thing. If we make that mutilation normal, like, even with the explosion of, plastic surgery, all of the things that exploded prior to this. Remember that program, The Swan? How fucked up was that?
Oh, I didn't see it.
You'd go in, American program, you'd go in, you'd be kind of dowdy looking, you'd be in the late 40s, early 50s, and you'd come out different tits, different teeth, different eyes,
Oh,
different nose, different hair. It was disturbing, but we were all eating it up at the time. And I think that all paved the way to make something like this normal.
because that is normalised now, isn't it? Like
Yeah.
ordinary, like it used to be celebrities. They
Mm-hmm.
would get
Yeah.
they would get plastic surgery. And you'd go, "Oh, look at how much work they've had done." But now it's people that you know.
Yeah.
How many
Yeah.
people do you know who've had their teeth done
Yeah.
or had a boob job or
Boob
whatever?
job or
Uh-huh.
nose job. And but I think when we make it normal to, like, chisel noses or cut breast tissue and put implants, and then to remove it is just, okay, we're going the other direction.
Hmm.
But there's a normalization to, aesthetically I'll make you happy,
Yeah,
aesthetically I'll make you
to
feel,
make you look different.
yeah, so you can change something. And there's a real, I wonder, even as we're talking, and I didn't think of this before, so it might come out wrong, but I wonder, even just when we started talking and we were talking about grief and the discomfort, when did we become so uncomfortable with someone else feeling so uncomfortable?
Yeah.
Like, if somebody is distressed, if somebody is suffering, if somebody is psychologically really, really hurting because something doesn't make sense to them, whether they have a diagnosis or not. But what is the one thing in life that calms us down? If someone can be with that, not go, "Oh my God, you want to change it? Okay,
Let's do it.
let's do it. Let's just do it." Yeah.
Yeah.
Regardless of the consequences.
And I suppose as, so you're a psychotherapist and I'm a trained counsellor. So we're both trained to sit with
Yeah.
that discomfort, aren't we?
Yeah.
We're used to
Yeah.
it.
And so are, like, psychologists and psychiatrists. And obviously in the gender clinics, I know they had a massive upheaval and overwhelm. I'm not excusing it, but you can imagine something being so small and niche to be completely overrun and bombarded with referrals. Like, you can see how quickly all of that slipped, all of the
Hmm.
safeguarding that was in place before that. But it's like, what is the reasoning for this explosion of, who started it? Why did it start? What's the purpose? They're the questions that are really kind of scary, I think, because, why do we want to make kids really vulnerable? Why do we want to separate them from their parents? Why do we want a community to take them in? Why do we want them to feel like they belong to strangers more?
Well, I would say that I don't want that. And
No, but
most
like,
of the
I
women
don't
who are
either.
in this don't want
No,
that.
but like, I often think, like, there's something in the ether, if it's affecting us all. If we don't question it, like, well, maybe that's the way I'd question it. Why are we doing this? Why are we okay with this? So that will inform, like, how uncomfortable I maybe am with it. But it's like, what would be the purpose in that, other
Have you
than
been
for
down any of those rabbit holes?
I be careful with myself, but there is an exploitation and a grooming when
Yeah.
that's happening, and it's very clear how. I wouldn't have to dive, I'd say, that far to see that happening.
Yeah, so if you follow the money, it yeah, so in America it's big business, and yeah, it's to do with transhumanism, and I think there's certainly high people in power, like with lots of money, who want to remove, like to integrate, make people better through technology and stuff like that. So I think it's to do with that, and then it's linked with surrogacy and um, the idea that in the future women won't have to carry their babies.
That's fucking terrifying.
I know it is.
But you know, if what kind of people do we create if we don't, like in pregnancy, the mother's stress response patterns to baby, the love, the connection, the bonds, the communication between mother and baby is constant, and mother and her environment. If we remove that, what are we creating to
Absolutely.
people? Even the womb experience. So if I was in my mother's womb, which I was, my eggs lived in my mother. I have my daughter. She has been in my mother's womb, and it goes back for generations. And inherently, we take on our generational history, our inner wisdom, our inner, the way you know something and you don't particularly know why
Hmm.
you know it, but you've learned that you know how to do it without having been taught. We'll remove all of that just to have like to be such a dead society. We'll have no purpose in inherently trying to undo things of our past so our children don't have to do it. It's a very freaky society, I'd say, we'd be trying to create to be controlled. You'd only be able to be controlled because a lot of these things remove people from what they know,
Yeah,
remove them from what they understand as true. The truth and reality are extremely important in life. There's only a few things you can really hang your hat on.
yeah,
Biology is one of them.
yeah.
The reality of your biology, your little space in the world, what your job is, your purpose, whether it's being a mammy or being a woman or being a sister or being a granny or an auntie or a best friend. You have a purpose and a reason in that, and that's all more important than even the job you do.
Yeah, definitely.
There's no love in what's happening. There's no care. There's yeah, it's actually, I can feel it being pulled back a bit with Trump being in, like, I never thought I'd live in a world where a president said we're going to stop mutilating children. And you're like, oh my God, he's my guy. Like, who the fuck was ever going to have to say that out loud on national television?
I know. And lots of people just don't understand why he's so popular. And like 5 years ago, I wouldn't have understood that either. It's only since what I know now.
He reminds me of, like, when you say truth out of the mouth of babes. He's very uncontained. He's like, your
Yeah,
child just tells you the truth. So there's something endearing. And I've absolutely no idea if him being in charge is going to create disaster. And I have no idea. But the only graw I have for that man is that he has the absolute balls to tell the truth and
mhm,
say that. And
yeah,
there's something, in the Lacanian therapy is like nom de pair. Daddy says no. I feel like the foot is down. And I was like, oh my God, finally, someone had to do it.
yeah. But they're going to try and sabotage him, aren't they? They
I
already
hope.
have. He's had 2 assassination attempts, hasn't he?
Imagine like that. It's that visceral that this shit keeps going and goes ahead. There's like, I think I was saying to you earlier that what frightened me a lot was in Ireland there was a referendum to remove the word woman and mother from the constitution. So like your inalienable rights would not be protected. And I'm not going to have any more children. I'm too old, but I thought my daughter won't be protected, her kids won't be protected if this goes ahead. And I remember feeling really frightened that we could just wipe that out and do something like that. And what would that mean for the family? I'm a single mother. It's not like I've had an like ideal setup, but still I'd want the family to be protected because that's where children thrive and have the best place, the best
Definitely.
chance. But it's like it's going to move people closer to childhood religions, because people are going to be like, stop the bus, I want to get off. How did this all change? We
Yeah.
need to go back to basics.
I think like we are encouraged to celebrate different forms of families, which obviously you don't want people to be feeling like they're excluded because they're different. However, that nuclear family's evolved for a reason.
Yeah.
And the reason is it's because it's the strongest way of bringing up children.
But it always has been.
Hmm.
Time doesn't change that. Time
Yeah.
doesn't erase that that's the optimal way to do things, and possibly the safest way
Hmm.
in society to do things. And I do think that for a lot of the messaging that children are getting now, it frightens me, even though I don't have a young child anymore. It frightens me that we're playing this game. You know, I remember years ago, my daughter, she was only about 5, and we were going into a chemist, and there was this really tall lady who was carrying weight. Now, she was tiny, right? And this woman was walking out, and she goes, Mammy, look at that really tall, fat woman. And she was standing right in front of us. And I remember thinking, I says to her, that is terrible. Tell that lady you're really sorry. That lady is not fat. Don't say that. And I remember we were in the shop. She's like, but Mammy, she is fat and she's huge. Like, she was just a really tall woman, right? And then I was like, I'm asking her to deny our reality to save that lady's feelings. She actually was only saying what she saw. She wasn't trying to be hurtful. And I was guilty of saying, don't say that. That's not true. And I thought, oh my God, that kindness is the same as saying, don't say that. That's that's a woman. That's not a man. And that's really dangerous. I was being dangerous. So what, we're denying reality. We're
Yeah.
saying what you see, I'm going to pretend to you is not true, and you just have to say what I see.
Hmm.
Like,
It's
we all watched the Olympics, like the boxing. That was terrifying, to sit in your house with the telly on and say, oh my God, we're watching a man batter a woman, and they're going to get a clap and a medal for it. How
no,
did it get here?
I know. I actually posted about that on Facebook, and I had this woman really go for me for saying, and she was like, "Well, where's your evidence?" And I was like, "I'm not giving you any evidence. There's no point. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. Like, I don't want to provide evidence. Like, the evidence is me eyes and me ears.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't need anything else." But I
But
just didn't want to argue with her because I wasn't
but
going to convince her.
no, but it's like, it's like the emperor has no clothes. We can see it. We're looking at it. Why are you telling me I'm wrong?
Hmm.
And that's very, very dangerous in a nightclub setting. That's very, very dangerous in a pub. That's very dangerous in a hospital setting. It's very dangerous. I really, really worry about women and men who've gone through sexual trauma, who need like the same sex medical person looking after them because of the triggers, because of the safety, and they have to mind a person's feelings in that. We've never had that until now. We've always had that respected.
Definitely have, but it's being eroded, isn't it?
It's been taken away. There was also, I was watching a thing on the Leche League. I thought about the breastfeeding groups being infiltrated by men, and in a way to be accepting of other people. So there's nothing sacred anymore that's for women
Hmm.
based on their biology.
I know they even said that it was better for the baby having a man breastfeeding, and it clearly isn't. But I think they've backtracked on that. Whoever said it, I think it was
But in
one of the
in that,
media.
there's no feedback loop in a man's emotional and nervous system, and all of the things that we're innately built for. That if you're breastfeeding your child, and even bottle feeding, you have that feedback loop and connection with the baby because you're biologically wired for this.
Yeah, I didn't realise. I was talking to my friend who had been, I think she'd been supporting other mothers with breastfeeding, that role
Yeah,
that's around. And she was saying that even if if you're breastfeeding a toddler and a baby at the same time, your body makes the right milk for each
for each
child.
child.
I'm
Yeah,
like, how on earth does that happen? Like, it
yeah.
just blew me mind.
But that's like our bodies are wiser
Hmm.
than we could ever pretend to be. And medical intervention on a man's body to hormonally balance him, to present as a woman or whatever way you call it, he doesn't have that pattern in his body. His body has not got that wisdom.
No,
And my biggest fear in all of that is in that dyadic attachment, what happens to the child? What
absolutely.
happens to the baby?
Well, it's
You
child
know?
abuse, isn't it?
Yeah, it feels that way. It
It
feels
definitely
100.
is. I can't think of another way of describing it. It's
But
absolute
whose
abuse.
need is it? Whose need?
Exactly. It's not fulfilling the baby's need.
No, well, when a woman breastfeeds her child, it's to feed her baby. Even if in the bond, in the feedback loop, she gets something really strong in that as well,
Hmm.
it's only so that you will attach and that
So you'll
baby will
keep doing
thrive.
it.
Yeah,
We've evolved to be like that.
but it's like we've taken away the animalistic understanding of our nature
Hmm.
by thinking a medical intervention can switch that up or interrupt it.
It's just so worrying to think that not only did a man decide that's what he wanted to do, but that whoever it was enabled it. I'm just horrified that
I
that's
feel
been
like a
allowed.
lot of fear around, say, other women in a group feeling that they have to be kind and not hurt somebody's feelings, even if it makes them deeply uncomfortable.
But like breastfeeding, like I breastfed my children and I wasn't embarrassed about that, but everybody around me was. So that made me more embarrassed. My brother, particularly, he didn't want to see that because he attached that sort of thing with
Yeah,
page
he's
three
like,
or
I want to
whatever.
see your
Yeah,
boobs. Yeah.
and he didn't like that at all. But, and like, so breastfeeding in public was quite uncomfortable, but I can't imagine being a woman in an all female group of breastfeeding support group and a man coming in and thinking that he can do the same as
But,
me.
but there's also that it's not that easy for everybody to breastfeed, for women to
Exactly.
breastfeed. And it can be quite difficult to get the latch and it can be extremely painful. And sometimes, I remember when my daughter was a baby, I breastfed for like 3 weeks, but it was so painful that I had to stop. But the feeling of having to stop emotionally is absolutely devastating, that your body isn't able to do, or you're not able to do what your body was made to do. And
I just
if
don't
we,
think there's enough support. I wish I had more support. I would have been able to do it for longer. And I had that same experience. It was very painful.
I think as well though, if there's a man breastfeeding in a group full of women and one woman is really struggling and feeling like that, to be that vulnerable, that emotional, and to break down in that place, emotionally the safety is gone because other women will understand. Where a man inducing himself hormonally to produce milk is not the same as that innate feeling. It just can't be because they're not biologically wired that way.
No.
And if, I often think of my granddad, he died when I was 6, but a really, really good relationship with him. And obviously, he was real old school because he's probably born in like 1911 or something. And I'm thinking, what the fuck would he make of this? What would they all say?
I know
How?
yeah, thinking about that generation.
Yeah, but there's no common sense anymore. It's like you're not allowed to think for yourself and have common sense and just say no. That's insane.
Well, we are allowed and we are going
Yeah,
to.
well, we have been, but there,
Yes.
like why we're like we might as well be living in Russia, like with the
This
sense.
is the thing. So, I had a conversation with a woman, I think it was last month, it wasn't very long ago, and she was very against when I started explaining about the podcast and what we would talk about, some of the things that we talk about on it. I didn't realise that she wasn't of the same opinion. And then she came out with all this stuff, and I was like, oh God, I wish I hadn't started talking to you. Anyway, she said, well, all the young'uns think this, so we have to catch up. And I was like, hang on a minute. We're the older, wiser adults who should be telling the young people to stop being ridiculous. And why
There
aren't
is,
you?
yeah, there is something about something being a trend and things shifting, but this is extremely dangerous.
Well, they're saying things like, oh, well, it's changed. It's not like that anymore. You're just old
The
fashioned.
biology doesn't change.
No.
This is the thing. We cannot be the opposite sex. Women and children will always need safeguarding. Men need their own space and women need their own space.
Yeah.
The degree of vulnerability in both sexes is different, and we both have extremely different needs.
Have you come across the men who blame women for the transgender stuff and it's
Oh,
feminism that's caused this? You invaded our spaces first.
and you know what? When I've listened to it, I've heard it. I've heard it and thought, I'll tell you one thing I did see, which I thought was bizarre. So in Ireland, I don't know if it's the same in England, there was all these, in like, say, local resource centres and stuff, they created this thing called men's sheds.
Yeah, yeah,
So for older men who'd retired, give them something to do, build stuff for the community and sell stuff. And the other day I saw something called women's sheds, and I did think, now they're taking the piss. Like,
yeah.
let them have it. The women have their,
Hmm.
especially the older women, sewing groups, craft groups, all these things where they come together in the community. So in a sense, having absolute equal rights isn't taking stuff from men.
Yeah, I
That's not.
agree.
They do feel, I'm sure, and they're allowed to feel it, that their spaces have been infiltrated. I do think that even though, we can't go too far, I do think sometimes when I'm listening to some feminists who are quite dogmatic, that there is a pretense that roles don't matter for some people.
Hmm.
And I think when it comes to family, they do matter. They don't matter that much when you're floating about on your own and you're working your job and you're on the piss Friday to fucking Monday. But it does matter when you become a family. Whatever that family looks like, your role matters because it's how you slot into that fabric of society. But I think when people say that, they'd have to explain each strand of it,
Hmm.
not just a brushstroke statement. I
Yeah.
do think, like, there's the tendency for things to be in extremes. Like, this is a no-brainer. We should not be mutilating kids. Men should not be in any of women's spaces, and we do need safeguarding in place. And our language should not be changed so that people are not upset, because then people become really unsafe. But I think where it's not women's fault this has happened, but when women support it to be kind to men, I do find that uncomfortable. I do
Yeah.
find it very uncomfortable that a massive number of women think this is okay, or that they think it's being kind when
Hmm.
people are being really hurt. That is something that disturbs me, because as a woman, as a mammy, as a sister, as an auntie, that kind of thing, I feel like if we don't make a stand and stay really solid on it, the younger people won't be protected.
Well,
And when
younger
people
people
don't,
aren't able to do that. I know, like,
no,
when I was younger, I wouldn't advocate for myself. I didn't know
no,
how. It's
no,
only because I'm older and I've been through loads of awful things that now
yeah.
I know how to stand up for myself, and I've been through some awful stuff. So my face just says, "Don't even try it." Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whereas I just didn't have that when I was young.
But it's also that, like, you're allowed to have boundaries now in life, and it's not your responsibility to make sure that people aren't upset with you.
Yeah.
You're not afraid of dropping people or people to lose people in life
No.
to stay safe.
Hmm.
And when you're young, it's a very scary thing to do, to stand up for yourself. It
It
takes
is.
years. And it's like a lifelong process, learning how to say, no, I'm uncomfortable. No, thank you. I don't want to. Or this is bullshit. This is absolute. What worries me as well is, like, I remember doing the training and small things stick out in your mind around human sexuality. And I remember there was one lecture, and I remember him talking about cross dressing. And I remember him saying the cross dresser in front of the mirror in the dress is in the castration complex, but when he lifts the dress, he has the denial of it because he still has his penis. And in any way that we spoke about cross dressing, wasn't so much that many people transitioned then. It wasn't popular, but it was all about the fetish. And it wasn't one specific fetish. It was like fetishizing, getting off on women's clothes, imagining that you had a vagina, imagine being fucked like a woman. Whatever it was, that's okay behind your own door. Because everybody can have their kink and their fetish and their taboo. they're safe, they're adults, they're doing it themselves. Off you pop. But I don't pull me into it. Don't make
No,
me entertain it.
no.
And it's okay if it makes me uncomfortable.
So sorry, was that a training course, did you say?
Yeah, I just remember it being part of the training, the human sexuality part of the training, especially when we did the analysis piece, the psychoanalysis and
Oh,
just the
right,
different
okay.
sexual stages,
Right.
as well as the amount of fetishes we can have. And a lot of fetishes are linked to trauma.
Mm,
And that's not to excuse, the public display of them. But actually, we had boundaries that kept us all safe. We had things that were taboo that you could do behind closed doors. That was your own business. It didn't mean it didn't exist. If we can feel every desire and it's all allowed, we'll have nothing to desire. Like
hmm
things, there's privacy for a reason, there's sacredness for a reason. We can't wear it all out there, show it all, then it just all falls apart.
Definitely. Well, that's what's happening. It's become okay to talk about whatever you want
Yeah,
anywhere.
but it's also okay to display it, to
Yeah,
be overtly sexual. Like, to look at OnlyFans, there's a lot of things where it doesn't make sense anymore.
I know.
Can porn be done in privacy? Can can it be your little thing? And now, like, there's normalising the stories of women wanting to break a record and sleep with 100 men. It's devastating.
I know.
Something really devastating happening all around. There's no sacredity around the body. You have one body to do your whole life.
Yeah.
You have one body to look after.
But as well, the way that men and women have, like, the way that it affects men and women when we have sex is different.
Yeah.
Women are, well, women use sex to bond, whereas men tend not to. I know that's a
Yeah.
generalization, but
Well, but there's also that, like, as a woman to have sex, you have to be entered by another human.
hmm
It takes a massive degree of vulnerability to be the one that receives
hmm
in that way. But I do think there's when this began and your man, like Dylan Mulvaney, and like the costume of being a woman really reduces us to being a prop in someone's game.
yeah,
And there's a real danger in that, especially for young girls, to be getting that messaging as if this is what makes you a woman. And like, we used to have a drag act that was, you know, you watch RuPaul's Drag Race, or there'd be one on in town. It was adult content, it was adult fun. Everybody knew it was a showgirl
yeah,
scene.
yeah,
Everybody knew it was a skit. They ripped the piss out of everything that was put on women as, an over amplified expectation in life. And it was comedy slash entertainment. And then they'd storybook drag hour. The fuck is that? Like, that
I
was
know.
adult. That was always adult entertainment. And any drag queen worth their weight was like, no, this is an adult
Yeah,
content.
yeah.
That's what makes it
So
funny.
one of the challenges I've had on TikTok recently was, well, what about pantomimes? But pantomimes aren't sexual, are they?
No.
We're there to
Oh my
laugh at
God.
the man who's dressed up as a woman and clearly doesn't look like one.
Yeah, but that's why it was always fun, but it
hmm
was child friendly.
Yeah,
And it was like if you watch a cartoon with a child and you're like, oh my God, that is fucking gas, but that bit's really funny because that bit goes over their heads, but actually
yeah,
I'm enjoying watching this. Like, we've loads of stuff that's
yeah,
been out for years like that, where you'll watch it and you'll get the joke that it'll be missed on them.
yeah,
So two people can watch it at the same time and have a completely different experience.
yeah,
But it's very different when it's someone twerking in a library with toddlers. It's
yeah.
very weird. Like,
Like, why do they want to?
well, it's even like, what do you feel like you're being progressive by bringing your kid to that?
They do.
Is that what it is?
Yeah,
Because I've noticed as well, like, you can talk to lots of different people, and some people want to sound like really accepting and cool, and yeah, like, I'm real open and I'm real liberal and all. I just don't understand that. I don't understand how you can be liberal about people being mutilated. Why is that liberal? Like, it's,
it makes me wonder if they know about that part of it.
how did they miss it though? It's
I know,
everywhere. Like,
I
I
know.
would wonder, like, it's everywhere. There's so many people have been talking about it the last few years. Like I thought, it was your woman's name Miriam Grossman. Is that the psychiatrist in America?
Possibly, I'm
I
not
think she
sure.
was a brilliant speaker, but she's also like, she's just telling the truth about where
Hmm.
all this began, all the John Money thing, all the grooming that happens to make something like this a sexual fetish for somebody.
Hmm.
So there is a real sadistic, sick part to it.
It's horrible. Like I
And we,
say, when I was first finding out about it, I thought, oh, this is grotesque. It can't get any worse almost. And then I find something else out, and I was just, my God, how much more is there? This is awful.
but I think it adds in different layers when it's young
Yeah,
people. You know, like you don't want adults who are vulnerable hurting themselves either. But when children as young as 13, 14, 15 are being infiltrated by an ideology that's extremely dangerous and not rooted in any truth.
yeah. And it was during the lockdowns as well. Everyone was online, and the children were really vulnerable then. I've got a friend whose daughter was just scrolling on her. She wouldn't get out of bed. She was really depressed. She wouldn't do anything, and she got sucked into it. She's okay now, I think. She's still a
But,
little bit, but
but even imagine the grief for the parents whose children have been pulled into this,
I know.
and they might have been getting this fed to them over and over again for months on end in the algorithm on TikTok or
Yeah,
wherever they're on.
absolutely. That's
And then
exactly
all
how
of a
it
sudden,
happens.
them exploding with this at home and them
Hmm.
losing the child that they gave birth to, that they
Yeah.
reared. The meltdowns, the kick off, the everything, and being at a loss in a world that you wouldn't understand, that it hasn't been on your radar. And then the threat that if you are saying no, that isn't right, that isn't how you just can't do that. I know you feel that way. That's okay to feel that way, but actually, I can get you help if you need it. But really, this will pass.
Yeah.
If you say that, and then there's a threat that you're not affirming them, or they're being affirmed in school, or that they will be taken from you.
They're undermining parents. They really are undermining parents.
But once you undermine a parent, that's what a groomer does.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what a groomer does.
Yeah.
It's like they don't really love you like I do. They don't understand you like I do. Do you know, really, I'm the only one that gets it. You should
Yeah.
trust in me.
Yeah.
Like, we warned children about this for years. We told them this is really dangerous. This is how it happens. This is what you do. This is what you stay safe from. But now we're flipping the script, and anybody has access to them.
Well, it's not us. It's not.
You know, I get that we're not doing it, but I
You
do.
keep saying we, and I'm like, no, it's not me.
No, it's not me either. But it
No,
is in society. That's what's happening. That's what we're
absolutely.
living in at the
You
moment.
are right.
You know, that's what we're living in at the moment. And I don't mean me either. Jesus, no, I don't agree with any of it. But I do think we're in a very scary place if you have a Let Women Speak event and people show up to shut women speaking down. What's so threatening about the truth?
Well, the truth hurts, doesn't it? It's really powerful, the truth, and it all falls apart when you start talking truth.
But I think in all the Let Women Speak events that I've watched, there's been the depth of pain that come in those talks from women. It's such a historical pain that gets replayed, that gets spoken about, and it's so innate that women aren't confused about who they are and what they are and what their purpose is. That to be shut down and that or being told that you're a bigot for taking up your space in the world and not allowing it be erased it's scary that
I was
that's allowed.
at I was at Let Women Speak in Liverpool, and that was one of the worst. And there was a woman who got up on the microphone, and she was talking about, I think it was either rape or sexual assault. I'm not sure which one. And there was men there. They weren't men in dresses. They were just plain men. I mean, they were masked up and everything. It was awful. They were really aggressive, and they were shouting "boring" over the top of her. I was horrified.
Yeah, that is disgusting. That
Hmm.
is it's it just like deepens the wounds, doesn't it? It just
Hmm.
deepens the wounds.
Oh, she was an amazing woman, and she was really like powerful and like so I've spoken at Let Women Speak as well, and um at the Hustons as well when I was during the election, and there's something about being on the in the centre of attention because I'm quite shy, so I went to loads of them before I actually got up and spoke, and it wasn't until after the election that I got the strength to do it.
That was really brave.
But you just stand up and just, well, for me, I just stood up and just this power just came out of me from God knows where. I didn't know I
But I
had.
actually think it's the group as well that holds each other together. I know
Definitely.
I didn't get to go to the Dublin one, and I watched it live and I was sobbing because it was a collective pain. There's a collective pain, a collective fear, something that we all innately hold and carry. And to watch how powerful the women were when they spoke about holding on to their own children and that they won't be awarded to the state. And in Ireland, we have a horrible history, a real disgusting history of the state abusing their mothers and their children and taking them. So this was like very, for me, it felt very visceral, very generational. It was like, no, you will not do it again. And it's mad how it takes different forms. Like in this way, it's like, what's the best way to control a society is if you don't know who you are.
You
Like when
don't know what the
people know
truth
who
is.
they are, yeah, they have power, they have agency, they have autonomy. If you take all of that away, you're going to have such a weakened society. And even with like the mass sterilisation of all of these children that have been through this system, where are our next generation of children coming from? Because none of them will have the ability to carry a child.
I know it's frightening, isn't it?
But it's disgusting to take that from somebody.
Hmm.
Imagine somebody taking away your ability to have a baby or to produce a baby or be an active participant in that. Like, and if you choose never to have children, that's fine, that's not new. But to take away your choice,
Well, I think that's part of the culture as well. They're encouraging women not to have babies.
do you know, I find in the job that I do, what breaks my heart is the lie that women were told that if they went and they got their career and they worked really hard and had it all, then they could have babies. And a lot of women in their mid to late 30s, even early 50s, who are like, I've time now, everything's sorted, I've worked really hard, I have everything. And they just have either a lot of difficulty having babies or have a lot of pregnancy loss and a massive amount of trauma associated with birth and pregnancy. And they were lied to. Everybody
Yes.
lied to them. They said, no, no, don't. All of a sudden, the teenage pregnancy or the woman that had a baby in her 20s was taboo, in
Yeah.
your prime.
Yeah.
In Ireland, they've introduced only last year, which I think is disgusting, like free contraception from the age of 16. I don't know whether it's to 24 or 34. I'm like, in your prime. They're actually asking you to take medication so you won't get pregnant.
Well, it's free for all women here. Yeah.
I think it's just horrendous, horrendous what it's going to do because it fucks us all up when we take the pill. Like,
Yeah.
I've never met anyone who took the pill and went, yeah, that really suits me. I'm delighted I took that. I feel great.
Yeah.
Like it's just not a conversation I've probably ever had.
And the way they talk about birth control is if like you um you sort of have sex once without birth control and that's it, you're pregnant. Well,
Yeah,
it doesn't usually work like that. So women are really terrified if they're not ready for children
yeah.
to take any risks.
But
So
it's
you end
at
up
the same
medicated.
yeah, but at the same time we have the Flow app. We have all these things where we can have I can do it all these days window and not on these days. And I think I suppose that's something as well that's really, really important in the conversation around men infiltrating women's spaces or trying to take over um or take from women what their experience is. Like it's unique to women that you have a constant fear of getting pregnant for most of your sexually active life from your teenage years until like
Hmm.
your 30s for definite. And that the moment you pee on that stick and you've two lines, your whole purpose in life changes and it's no longer about you.
Yeah,
Like I although men have their own relationship with getting that news, women, their body is not their own anymore.
absolutely.
They don't have the freedom to work, leave the house, do anything unless they have that set up support. So for women's experience of life and their sexual life is very different to a man's.
Yeah.
And women can't walk. You have to stay. That's your responsibility now.
And this is the thing. So, like, what really makes me uncomfortable about women's groups where they include the other kind of women, so men, and it's about shared experience for women. So I don't like, even if it's not, I don't feel in danger or any of that stuff, forgetting about that kind of part of it, although that could be an issue as well.
Could be a factor, yeah.
It could be a factor, but leaving that aside, I have nothing in common with a man who thinks he's a woman. He has not shared
Yeah.
my experience.
No, and but there's a lot to be said for the emotional safety and the ability to be vulnerable. I was in the toilets. I was out on doing the 12 pubs, which was kind of carnage last Friday. I was in one pub. It's a really cool pub. I'm in the toilets with my daughter. We're waiting. Like, she's 20, she's allowed to drink. We're in the toilet, so just in case you think I'm terrible, man. And we're waiting in the queue. They're always longer in the women's toilets, so
Yeah,
you just listen to all the chatter. And there's a woman in front of me, a Spanish woman, and she's talking to another woman about women's traditions in Spain on Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve, where you wear red panties. And she's talking about this out loud. They're having the conversation, and we're all listening. We're all getting involved. None
yeah,
of our business, but we're all getting involved. But I stood back from it, and I was like, it's so safe in here that she can just have that chat.
yeah,
It's not to arouse anybody.
yeah,
It's not to be sexy. It's just to share.
yeah.
And there was such a lovely feeling, and I knew I was going to be doing this, and I was like, don't forget that. And I would forgot it to this moment. But I was like, if there was a man there, nobody would have that
No,
conversation because that's the women's space to have that. So while she was talking about the red panties, someone else was saying our tradition is, and they're the private traditions that nobody really hears about,
yeah.
unless culturally that's appropriate to you.
I was
So
going to
there's a
say, I've
lovely
never heard of that.
no, but well, clearly this lady does it anyway. But it was a lovely, safe conversation. And I thought there's no threat to this woman having this conversation, and we're all really enjoying it. And
Hmm.
someone else can share. And it can be about something sexy, but it's not sexualized
Yeah,
because there's nothing to sexualize it.
yeah.
It's safe.
It's those shared moments, and yeah, I really like being in groups of all women. There's something special about it.
It really like fills your soul. Like, even I have a group of friends, and there's five of us, and we've stayed friends from when we're kids, and we've all watched each other grow up, have our families, and there's something so unique about getting together and being able to be vulnerable about the most intimate things that nobody else is privy to ever that conversation or that
Hmm.
side of you.
Yeah,
And there's such a safety and a support,
yeah,
a normalising, a validation that comes with. They'll tell you when you're wrong as well. They'll challenge you,
yeah,
but they'll also, prize your experience in a way that you're able to communicate it in such a safe way that you would never have that conversation in a group of men or with one man present.
yeah. Well, you wouldn't, because it changes the dynamic.
Yeah, it changes the dynamic, and there's a like in it reminds me of when you hear stories of like the red tent, and the women go there and they support each other, or the women, in villages that are like all doing their washing down at the river. There's
Hmm.
no men there. And women need that because they're the emotional hub of the family.
Yeah,
They're the emotional hub for a lot of things. They're wired that way. We're all wired that way. And we do our best to regulate everybody emotionally. And then together we fill up our cup and regulate each other.
yeah,
And that is unique because a man can be in his home and be in shift form, but it's only when mammy pulls it together, everybody else starts to regulate. So everyone is plugged into her in a way to be the modulator between the emotional state of the house. Where
yeah.
men don't have that role in life. And if a man presents as a woman and wears a dress, he still can't recreate that.
No, I never really thought about it like that. But yeah, that's right. I've remembered all the times when I was going through a hard time around men, and I was supporting them, even though it was a shared hard time. But I was the one who was supporting everybody, even though
Yeah.
I was in it as well.
Yeah. And like I'd work with a lot of mammies, and even though they're really, really struggling and devastated, I'd be like, it's so important that we do this work, because once you stabilize and level, everybody else around you will be easier to manage, because they're all looking to you to regulate them. So I just see it happen time and time again. And I think that's why women mind each other in that way as well, because they know they've such a massive job to do behind the scenes.
Yeah.
So it's a different kind of support that's needed.
Yeah, it sounds like your work is so important and so needed.
Yeah, I think there's not that many people in Ireland that do it. There's different, there's group work and stuff like that, but one-to-one therapy, like nationwide for people in this situation, is really, it's really needed, especially to hold the parents up. The whole family is shattered by the experience. So it's like, how do we hold everybody till they can hold each other? You know? I
Yeah,
love it though. I love it. It's a very privileged job
it
to do,
is.
to be in such an intimate space with such pain and trauma and such fear. There's so much terror in it. And to be trusted or allowed into that is, yeah, it's a big honour. It
It's
really,
almost like your worst nightmare, that the
yeah,
most awful thing that you could think of has happened to those
has
women
happened. Yeah,
and those families.
yeah. And do you know what I have to say? Like, there's such a beautiful client base, such a diverse, beautiful client base. And in it, I've learned a lot, but it does bring it down to the brass tacks and the, like, part of me doesn't want to give this topic so much attention in my head, because people are really suffering. There's people going through really, really massive tragedy. And sometimes I have to pull back a little bit. And, you could be sitting with somebody who's describing holding their dead child and not being able to bring them back to life. And then you've someone gone like 365 days of girlhood. And I'm like, which should I worry about actually? While I feel that that is really fucking important, that that doesn't grow too many legs and so many people aren't harmed, when can we all in life get back to real problems that people have?
Absolutely, it's
Yeah.
taken up
And I'm
so
not
much
trying,
energy.
yeah, I'm not trying to take away from how valid it is that this is a massive problem, but it does make me worry sometimes that we had real worries before this came along, and they're getting ignored in lieu of this getting so much attention.
The thing is, though, if you lose the word woman, if that's no longer there, then women don't have any rights. So the
We can
impact of
never,
that is
yeah,
huge. So we have to
yeah,
pay attention to it.
we can never lose the word woman. We can
No,
never ever be erased, because our God given right, whoever God is, it will be taken. And I remember watching with my daughter, what was that one? The Handmaid's Tale.
yeah,
And I remember watching like the last series, and they put the mask on, and it fucking terrified me. I wouldn't wear one during COVID either. Like, I just don't like rules, stupid rules. Can't cope with, and I don't like the sensation. I suffer with me breathing a little bit, so can't take a breath in anyway. But I was like, we're not too far from that reality somewhere.
absolutely. That's what scares me. That
That was terrifying.
if we don't win this, look at the rest of the world, like Afghanistan, like women aren't allowed to speak
No,
there. And
but
it
even
terrifies me. It's bad enough that it's happening there, but I absolutely don't want it to happen here.
no, no. How would we cope? We've never had to live through a time where we were censored, where we had to modulate mind our speech, where certain things were like so taboo to say, and yet you can walk around in fishnet tights, fake boobs, a short skirt. Like, you're allowed to do
Hmm.
all of that, but you mightn't be able to say, "I'm sorry, but that's actually a man," or "I'm sorry, that's actually a woman." Like,
Hmm.
I can't play that game with you right now. And you said something about, what was it? Just, I'm after losing it. There's something about, you said something about surrogacy, and it was playing at the back of my mind. There's something very frightening about that becoming really normal, in that I just think the trade on using women's bodies in vulnerable situations, and the exploitation that can happen out of that, and also what it feels like for a baby in a womb of a woman that might have to do this based on survival, and what that connection with that baby is like, and what
Absolutely.
that womb experience and birth, and then being displaced from the smell of the mammy, or the pain she'll have to go through to give that baby up. I think we shouldn't pretend in society that none of these things are really complicated and not without massive consequence.
Absolutely, and it is becoming normalised and it's celebrated. Like, look at these gay men who've had this baby. Well, gay men can't have babies without a woman,
Yeah.
and that is terrifying. But they're like, everyone's clapping at them.
But we've moved away from, there's been a massive shift away from, there's a lot of children who can't be minded by their own family or looked after by their own family. And we're hearing nothing about adoption, fostering, any of those things. There was something I saw, I can't quote it or anything, but I remember someone saying, I want to get a womb transplant so that I can have an abortion. There was something,
It was a
oh,
man.
it was a man, wasn't
Yeah,
it?
yeah, I
And I
think I heard
remember
that.
thinking, what the fuck is wrong with you?
I know.
There's absolutely no emotional connection to the agony that women go through, to having to be in a circumstance where that's your option or your choice, as if it doesn't come with a massive emotional fallout.
Absolutely.
Physical pain, reminders, the threads of regret, of what if, like, it's so complex, so complicated, that to want to experience something like that for your own pleasure is very fucked up.
It really is. It
Yeah.
really is.
I think like there is a massive link with everything that's being medicalized, isn't there? And in in the infiltration of what women can do naturally to create something alternative. But I really, really worry about what kind of population we're going to create in that. Like if trauma can happen in the womb, what that would be like, what that baby's going to grow up feeling like, probably inseminated in a completely different country, knowing mammy's voice and mammy's mother tongue and being sent to another country to live with strangers while they're searching for mammy's smell. And it just, I can't even begin to imagine. And you know what'll happen? Those babies won't have the words because they had no language at the time. And no one's doing a longitudinal study to see what is the fallout
No,
mentally or emotionally from that.
I think even when there's danger for a child, that adoption process is also traumatic.
Yeah.
And it just, like, I don't know what the answer is, but I have a real visceral, like, reaction to any adoption. It's just, I just don't feel like that's the right thing to do. But I obviously don't have any answers because it's a really complex thing. But
Yeah.
like me, I do have a visceral reaction to children being adopted.
I suppose for me query would have been, why are we not even talking about that anymore? Like, I would rather a child be adopted than live in a care home, because there's so much grooming that happens in care homes and children just get picked off all the time.
Mm,
Lots of children go missing. Like, would they need the safety of a home? But I find it very disturbing that surrogacy becomes the hot new thing, because we haven't actually sat back and thought about what's the impact.
well, they used to have puppies in the handbags, didn't they? That was the
Mm,
accessory, and now it's babies, surrogate babies. It's really frightening.
yeah. And it's just we don't know what it's going to look like down the road. But right now, if it's this uncomfortable, more people should be talking about it, wondering about it, and also wondering about the impact on the women that are recruited to do this. You're really worried about what that experience feels like for them. And I imagine that most women in that situation will be doing it because of financial survival, and it's because of economic reasons that they possibly need the money. And then what is it funding? Like, it's, yeah, I think because women are being erased in all of these areas, or there's an attempt to erase the word woman, the meaning of a woman, we must hold a massive amount of power for people that are
Definitely,
really threatened by it.
definitely.
Or
That is
why would
definitely
we,
it. That's the hub of it. That's why women have been, like, that's why women threaten men. That's why men respond the way they do sometimes. When it goes wrong, like men are violent and treat women really badly, it's because they see them as powerful, not because they see them as weak.
them as weak? If all the women could come together and realise their power, we wouldn't need Trump to say no. It's just we all have to say no.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And on that note, shall we wind it up? Because we've been
We
talking
can,
for
yeah.
quite a long
I
time.
know, I'll have you knackered. I'll have you knackered.
Well, thank you so much for coming on my
Oh, so
podcast.
lovely to
It's been
talk to
a
you.
really interesting conversation. I've really enjoyed it.
I have too. Thanks so much.